Man, can you believe it's been 19 chapters since we set out for Grust, and then we had to meet Wang and all this shit began? Well, now it's 19 chapters later, it's time to kill Hardin. You say proud, but it probably was built on blood money, considering the history that we kind of forgot about for the remake. That Hardin is just a big old jerk. Can't believe he keeps slaughtering the innocent. How dare he? I'm gonna give him a stern talking to when I get to him. He's gonna receive one hell of an angry letter. Excuse me, that's a sword. No, that was the previous chapter, Marth. This one's Dark Emperor. The last one was the final battle. Now, before we begin, the game is going to yet again remind us to use the light sphere. I mean, I guess to be fair, they don't want you to get all the way through the chapter only for you to realize that you screwed up and left the light sphere behind, but considering you'd have to leave it in the inventory of somebody you're not bringing for that to be completely inaccessible, I don't think it's a huge deal. Anyway, how is everyone? Alright, defense and resistance, not bad, but it's on errand, so it's useless. Magic and skill. Eh. Katarina, I'd praise you even if you didn't do that well. Except you do pretty well, so like, good going, keep it up. Oh boy, 11 experience on a character I don't use. Alright, well, this is a little underwhelming. Who do we have to talk to? Oh, it's Navarre. I don't even remember if this is the second or third conversation. I'm pretty sure it's only the second one. And honestly, if I have one regret about this playthrough, it's using Navarre as much as I have. I know I used him in Shadow Dragon, but he's taken up a lot of character slots that would have been useful for characters I want to use, like Fina. I really haven't been using Fina. Not to say the supports are a payoff for her, but she's a good unit in general. Navarre, on the other hand, is another Myrmidon. My unit is a Myrmidon, so it's not great. It's a bit redundant. And I don't know why I was so focused on getting his supports, because they're kind of boring. Honestly, I don't care how hot he is, I've come to the realization that Navarre kinda sucks as a character. I mean, like the other day, I mentioned that I'd much prefer to have Ogma in Warriors over Navarre. Navarre does the whole angsty swordsperson thing, but like, other characters since him have done it so much better. Cause he's not really like the angsty swordsman with a heart of gold or a softer side. I'm pretty sure Navarre's just a dick, he's just kinda weird about women. Like, most of the other, like, cool, calm Myrmidons at least have something else to them. I think the only other character I don't care that much for is Rutger, but, like, yeah, other than that, Navarre here is, like, I believe he actually is kind of just a dick and nothing more. Usually when a character says, I don't need anyone, you know, secretly they're like just too shy or scared to make a connection to other people. I'm pretty sure Navarre does actually legitimately just hate everyone. Alright, that's done and over with. Anyone interesting to talk to? No, we're at the War Council now? Okay, cool. Yeah, like most people who aren't evil. I mean, look, just because we have other goals doesn't mean we should rush this. If there's still a possibility we can save Hardin, then we should try to figure that out. we already know about this. I'm just gonna play this now before we look at the map, but hey, here's another warning to make sure you bring the light sphere. You probably get it by now. I think they go a little overboard with this, though. I guess to be fair, they want the introduction at first, or like they want to present the idea at the start, and then just have the constant reminder in case you forget after saving once you're through the chapter description or summary, whatever. Anyway, though, yes, here we have the map. This one should also look familiar, but we've got a lot of tough units here. Including not these guys down here, but this Earth Dragon. Hey, yeah, remember the final boss of the first game? Yeah, one of those guys is just hanging out here, and also, despite this being normal mode, he's got a range of 1 to 2. As does Hardin because he wields Gradivis. So yeah, with an Earth Dragon and Hardin on the field, this isn't gonna be an easy fight. Oh, he also has a hostage, but that doesn't matter as much. Aww, I just wanted to destroy Gruss, but she wouldn't let me. I'm Hardin and I'm important. Just want to destroy Gruss because they're jerks. If you try to hurt Nina, heads will roll. Medea, the open your eyes thing really isn't going to work. Like, his eyes are open right now. Did you notice the thing where he just has black eyes with red pupils? I mean, that's not really a normal thing as far as I know. Even for Monikets, who are a dragon-human hybrid. They kind of just have normal eyes, not demon eyes, so I don't know. I feel that's, at the very least, not the best phrase. If not, just an idea that's not gonna fly with him. Anyway, though, yeah, him having a hostage doesn't matter because the rescue staff exists. And that is more or less the last, I don't want to say mandatory use of the rescue staff, because it's not, like, it's never been mandatory, but it's the last extremely helpful one. Anyway, I sped up too quickly. Let's talk about Medea. Well, on one hand, Medea has the same problem as pretty much every other character we've gotten recently. She is a high level, her growth rates aren't quite good enough to really be good in the long run, especially given what little time she has, and we don't have that many chapters left anyway. I will give her one thing though, her base stats aren't half bad. Her skill, speed, and defense are all pretty solid, and that strength's not horrible either. Her defense and resistance growth rates are also pretty solid as well. I'll admit I'm not fond of that strength, and honestly 60 in both skill and speed is okay but not great considering she doesn't really have any other strengths. Her defensive stats are honestly not horrible. While they don't look that high, when you're not a knight, especially one named Horus, defense is usually pretty low, and of course, 15% resistance is 15% better than most other characters, so if she started as a cavalier or at the very least a lower leveled paladin, she might actually get some pretty good growth rates. As it stands, they might be okay, but RNG might just slam dunk her straight into the trash. Which would suck, because I like Medea, and I want her to be good, but, like, goddamn. It's supposedly the final battle, guys. We have no time to use her. Okay, so Medea's been talked about. I gave her a few lances, but unfortunately she doesn't quite have the speed to match this thief. But that doesn't matter too much. He's not gonna get far before I kinda just lance him to death. Anyway, though, quick note about this chapter. Apparently, in the original Mystery of the Emblem, this chapter actually started with the palace gates locked, which, I don't know, it doesn't make too much of a difference other than it wastes maybe a little bit of time. I guess you gotta get Julian in there sooner. But like, you can still do everything else after you open the doors. I just think it looks cooler though, you know? It's just one of those things where the original tile set's just a lot more interesting than this one. Whereas you get to see like the roof of the castle and Mystery of the Emblem, here it's just your standard kinda dull looking castle tile set. Which, I like the character art slightly more here than I did in Shadow Dragon. Tile sets still kinda dull. Could use a little bit more color, that sort of thing. Anyway though, in terms of strategy, there are quite a few reinforcements to look out for. When reinforcements arrive in Lunatic mode, there will be 2 extra of those alongside them. And there's actually a second set of reinforcements near the end, and 4 extra reinforcements will arrive alongside them in Lunatic, so yeah, lots of units. In addition, there's an extra 2 heroes in this initial area, and an extra sniper as well. And there's also a bishop down near the Earth Dragon, and 2 heroes accompanying that said Earth Dragon, and to top it all off, a single hero, like at the very bottom little room beneath where Hardin is, assisting the other dudes. Which honestly at that point is probably the least threatening thing, considering everything else. In addition, we also have the Cell. In Shadow Dragon, there were friendly units in there and we wanted to prevent them from dying. Now it's just a bunch of jerks who will attack us from a distance, and a single hero to guard them. They still lock themselves in though, which I guess is an effective strategy. Not gonna be effective enough though. In addition, there is actually a Gaiden chapter after this. If you'll remember, there's one plot thread that hasn't been tied up. It's Eremiah. In case you hadn't realized. So, if you complete this chapter within 24 turns on normal mode, you will access that. You can also access that chapter by completing the Shield of Seals, or having at least 3 of these characters alive. Wolf, Sedgar, Violent, Roshia, and Medea. So, the Wolf Guard and also Medea. As long as you've got at least 3 of them, you're good to go. There is actually something odd about, like, the way this chapter works out, but we'll talk about that later. But for once, the, chapter time limit's actually maybe not important, but it adds to that weirdness. Again, I'm kind of dancing around the issue, so I should stop talking about it. We'll get to that later. For the time being, topic of the day is Hardin. Let's talk about that guy, and how they extremely mishandled him. So, unfortunately, I know I mentioned a lot that I liked him in Shadow Dragon, but they really mishandled Hardin here. Because in the first place, he's kind of a generically evil villain, and their justification for that is not good. So, in the last chapter we learned that half the reason Hardin is evil is because he got friend-zoned by Nina. Whenever you can fairly accurately describe a situation as such, that's never really a good thing, but like, that's more or less it. They try to make it slightly more complex, but it boils down to Nina didn't love him, and he's real sad about that, so then he got possessed by an orb. The other half is just like the whole, oh, I must destroy the world because everyone in it is evil. And to summarize that with one of my newer favorite Paranatural quotes, the world is impure, therefore it is ethical to destroy the earth. God, you're the worst. But yeah, that's kinda just it. He does that whole shtick, and there's no real reason for him to do so, honestly. I've thought a lot about this, and I feel you could recontextualize a lot of Hardin's character to make it a little less bad. You'd have to change a little bit of it, but not too terribly much. First things first, of course, his love for Nina and the fact that it's not reciprocated being the primary thing is just the worst. It is extremely petty, and it's like, you can't justify it, really. If it weren't the primary thing, I think it would at least be a little better. It would still be petty, but his focus being on Nina's just, ugh. I don't really have words for it other than, ugh, God. It's so dumb. But that being said, so, one of the reasons I dislike the fact that they dropped the backstory of Arcania, outside of the fact that I like that concept in of itself, I think it adds a really neat angle to Arcania, and I feel like if you actually brought that to present-day Arcania, it would actually justify Hardin's whole "I must destroy the world because it's impure" thing. Because there's really no reason for him to have that attitude. The start of the game has Hardin quickly rebuild Arcania, and people love him. It says that. Like, his people thought he was super good, because he was quick to restore Arcania and he made a good ruler. But at the same time, I feel like adding an angle of, actually Arcania kinda sucks, would make sense. Like, you could still make it sound like everything was super great at the beginning. And of course, I feel Hardin quickly rebuilding Arcania is a really integral part of the story. A, because it shows that initially, yes, he's a very good ruler, but of course, it also gives leeway for him to build up the army and thus presents Arcania as a very powerful force. However, I feel like, at the very least, having some sort of idea of the nobility being against Hardin for some reason would actually help him to see the world as something that's, imperfect, unfair, causes suffering, that sort of thing, and this is yet another situation in which I think Heroes' writing actually really helps. Apparently, myself and whoever writes for Heroes, or maybe it's more than one person, we seem to be on the same wavelength. So, Hardin's 5-star level 40 quote in Heroes. There are countless kings and even more nobles in the world, but most lack the power to back up their status. Most of them simply rot in the mud of their privilege. These fools invite war to their doorsteps and then send their own citizens off to die. What point is there for such a country to exist? Perhaps it would be best for such places to be destroyed outright, this very world included. However, through the fog of war I saw a light, Arcania's true treasure. I swore on my sword to protect her. It was that purpose which showed me that the country, the world, needed to be cleansed. I needed to exile the fools and kill all who opposed me. I still have questions about why he hired Lang, but okay, go on. Even if that meant cutting down someone entrusted with a fire emblem itself. Pardon me, what was I saying just now? Right, I must annihilate the rebels. Ready the army! That's probably not how that line is supposed to be read, but eh. So, yes, obviously, bit hypocritical there, but I'm fine with, like, slightly hypocritical logic. He still sends his own people off to die, though, at the same time, to be fair, what would explain Lang is if he basically just recruited all the war criminals. Basically people that he could justify to himself are worthy of death, and just have them fight. Of course, it doesn't explain him killing actually good people either, but, possessed by a demon. If they at least tried to justify it up to a certain extent, I could then say, okay, fine, the Dark Sphere took it too far. But when it's all Dark Sphere all the time, it's like, oh, okay, you need an excuse to make Hardin really generically evil. But anyway, yes, Heroes adding the idea that there are just people in the world, mainly nobility, that Hardin saw imperfections in, and in addition, I also feel like it kind of implies that before he was possessed, he harbored some of these feelings. And I think that's kind of interesting as well. But I could totally see a case of, Arcania still being just as imperfect as it was before. You know, in the past, Arcania prided itself as a great place, but was built on death and theft and the like. And hey, what do you know? Yet again, it prides itself on being great, but Norda's in walking distance of the palace? That's state of corruption number 1. Norda fucking sucks. I mean, that's the place Linde was almost sold as a slave in Shadow Dragon. And I mean, you could say, oh, well, that's just Dolar, because Dolar came in and occupied the place, so, then all the ruffians were there. But then remember that Katarina was beaten for fun in Norda, and that was before Dolar took over, so I'm gonna say Arcania's, and also especially Norda, have always been the worst. Dolar probably just exacerbated that problem. There's not that much else to go off on, other than the one part in the BS chapters, Chapter 1, in which Camus mentions how corrupt Nina's father was as a king, and while he treated her well, he didn't treat his country well. He was very selfish, and the people suffered because of him. So, royalty in Arcania, not exactly good either. Maybe not as bad as Norda, but still pretty bad. Anyway, brief break to talk about the Earth Dragon we're being attacked by right now. So yes, even in normal mode, these guys have a range of 2. You might have also noticed that Cecil, one of my strongest characters, would have been hit for 24 damage. Earth Dragons hit like a damn truck. Now thankfully, the Earth Dragon, at least in normal mode, does not have nearly as much HP as Medius did in Shadow Dragon. And they're super susceptible to crits. I also got super lucky with my dodges, but a single hit from an Earth Dragon would have taken out most of my HP. That being said, I could have just used Ryan, and honestly, he probably would have just exploded that Earth Dragon on the spot. But, I figured I did want some experience for Marth because he kinda needs it. Anyway, there's actually one more thing I want to talk about with Hardin, and it should be coming up soon. His whole relationship with Marth, I think, is fairly interesting. I mean, with the added context. As it stands, it very much conflicts with his character from the previous game, in which, immediately after meeting him, he knew Marth was a man of integrity, and now he hates Marth a lot. So, one of his lines from Heroes is, "Parading this Prince of Light as some devoted patriot knight. Nothing but a grand deception. It will not feed the citizens. If a country is weak, its future holds only decay and inevitable collapse." I'd also like to mention the line before I move on. "Uncommon though your strength may be, it is no match for the dark sphere I hold. Do not forget your place." That has nothing to do with what I want to talk about in this episode. I just think it's kind of funny. "Hey, fucker, I have this orb. Don't think I won't murder you through your phone screen if you step out of line." Anyway, though, once you pass this threshold right here, we get a cutscene. So I'm just gonna casually, not destroy that archer. That was on purpose because I wanted Sirius to finish the job. But anyway, yes. Hardin is now going to shout at Marth from across the room. Like I said, this kind of comes out of nowhere, and I guess is supposed to just display the fact that Hardin is so far gone that he hates Marth now, even though he very much did not in Shadow Dragon. But I do kind of like Heroes' interpretation, and it's actually made me think about a few things. So, one of the things I like about Heroes, other than this, is he mentions that through the fog of war, he saw a light, which of course is Nina. And Nina and Hardin, despite supposedly working together for years before Marth came along, don't really have any sort of chemistry. you don't see them talk much, so him loving Nina is just such, like, it's barely there. And even in this game, he keeps saying he loves Nina, or loved her before she betrayed him, quote-unquote, but I like the idea that Hardin loved Nina, for her ideals, and I think that actually sets her apart from Marth, because, like, they're both characters who are very idealistic. They do go about it in different ways, and oftentimes Nina's depression and her unrequited love for well, not unrequited, Camus loves her too, but it does not work out for multiple reasons. Her love for Camus often gets in her way, and while Marth also has issues with depression, most of his stem from people dying around him, and his inability to save everyone. They are very similar. However, I would like to point out the fact that Hardin would have actually noticed Nina's suffering a lot more because he was actually with her, and while he was in the war with Marth, by that point Marth had a lot of allies, so it's possible that perhaps throughout the war, Hardin didn't see Marth's struggles nearly as much as he saw Nina's, and so that manifests in this way, that he now believes Marth's position to be just superficial. Like, everyone calls him a hero, but in reality Marth's actually very weak. Which is kind of unfair, because I feel like one of the reasons he'd say that is because he himself invaded Altia. And yes, it sucks that Marth lost Altia again, even though now he is old and powerful enough that he should be able to protect it. When he lost it as a kid, it was a little more understandable, but now it's just silly. But again, a little unfair for Hardin to judge when he was the one who took it over. I mean, come on. Part of the reason you succeeded here is because you betrayed his trust, Hardin, come on. But anyway, that difference in Hardin's eyes actually makes the whole Nina betrayed me thing make at least a little more sense, because it's not so much she betrayed him by not loving him, but because she gave Marth the Fire Emblem when he feels he didn't deserve it. And another thing about that is actually, I think that then makes an interesting parallel with the Avatar as well. In this case, both Iris and Hardin saw sort of Marth's weakness. Except, at the beginning of the game, Iris recognized that as, it's kind of just a byproduct of Marth's ideals. He's often unable to save people, and that worries him constantly, but Iris actually appreciated that. They both, again, have very similar ideals, just like Marth and Nina, whereas Hardin might not have seen it that way. He might have just seen that as weakness, and that Marth didn't really have the power to back it up. There was one more thing I wanted to talk about. Oh yes, Nina and Hardin. So I mentioned that at being the forefront, Hardin's unrequited love for Nina is extremely petty and just really not a good plot point. But I think if it's just, even if it's the thing that pushes him over the edge, even if it isn't the majority of what allowed the Dark Sphere to take hold of him, I think the idea that Nina not returning his love makes sense to a certain extent, because while Hardin was able to repair his country quickly, the implication from the intro was that nobody else rebuilt as fast as him, so at that period, he didn't really have anyone to talk to. Any other rulers weren't really in a position to interact with him, including his own brother, who was probably still busy in Orlus, so he didn't have friends in that regard. And in addition, he didn't have the Wolf Guard either. his closest friends and allies were still part of the Orlus army even after he left. You know, it wasn't until the last chapter that they defected. So he didn't have anyone, really. He was married, but Nina didn't love him, so she was distant. Combined with the idea that Arcania is not a perfect place, and perhaps he was receiving some sort of resistance from, at the very least, nobility, trying to push back on him for being too good, I feel not having a single friend in the world would at least be a little more understandable as to why the Darksphere was able to take him over. And again, that doesn't put everything on Nina. It's not just Hardin blaming Nina all day, every day. Anyway, though, speaking of which, it's time to actually fight Hardin. So, obviously, any character can fight him provided they have the Light Sphere. This isn't a situation where only Marth can kill him. But, you know, as an LP, I would kind of prefer to have Marth deal the killing blow. The problem is, I don't think the rapier does bonus damage to him, does it? Because it wasn't glowing green, and while Hardin looks like he's armored, and he's armored in Heroes, I don't think I'm getting effectiveness bonus for this, so... Considering how little damage Marth does, and how much damage Hardin does, this is a pretty tough fight. I think my backup plan was to have Katarina grab the Light Sphere, attack, and then trade it back to Marth, but I also don't think Katarina did much damage anyway, if I'm remembering my old runs correctly. Has been a while since I played the chapter myself, but yeah. At this point, it pretty much just came down to relying on Marth's critical hits, thanks to the rapier, and now, provided I'm at least able to get a single crit off, this should end the battle. Obviously, this really was not the ideal way to take on the boss, but I do love to make it more dramatic by using the main character. It's kind of like fighting Lundgren with Lyn in FE7. It's more thematically appropriate for the story, but goddamn, it makes things more difficult. Hardin, that was the problem in the first place. Have you learned nothing? God damn it, Hardin. Anyway, Hardin, you really haven't done anything to justify forgiveness other than the fact that it was mostly the Dark Sphere affecting you, but still. You were kinda being a dick. And with that, we get the Dark Sphere. So, I don't need to, you don't need all of the orbs in play to repair the Shield of Seals, but yes, Binding Shield, god damn it, why are they so similarly named? So yes, we complete the Binding Shield, which gives Marth +2 to all stats, except health. In addition, of course, Marth can still open chests as well. So, yeah, I mean, it's really weird because there's not much of this game left outside of the Gaiden chapter, so we're really only going after Eremiah next. Huh, weird. I don't think he needs those +2 stats that much, but if it helps, it helps. I'm not gonna look a gift horse in the mouth. Unfortunately, though, that does mean we've lost the orbs. Also, I wonder why I gave Sirius the Gradivus. Why could that be? Well, it's probably just because he's really good with lances. Alright, so, now that our inventory is kind of weird thanks to the lack of orbs, we've cleared the map. And hey look! We've solved everything! The clerics are here! We didn't even have to kill Garnif for this. I don't know, that seemed like a pretty important part of the checklist, but I guess if we don't have to do that, we're good to go. That's a weird thing to say. Garneth's minions! The heretic bishops! Ah, crud, he got the plot important item. Let's get the fuck out of here, boys. The ruse is up. That's a weird Garneth voice. He really sounds more like the... I've actually lost my Garneth voice from Warriors. I gotta play that again. Anyway, I like to think the heretic bishops ran away like vampires, holding their cloaks over their heads and hissing because of the shield. Anyway, though, yes, unfortunately I have decided to record the bad ending. It's really not that interesting. It's basically just... we're fooled by this somehow, and then, like, half of the proper ending plays. But also nothing bad happens. Like, there isn't even a post-credits scene in which the game's like, oh, and like 2 months later everybody died because you fell for the whole fake cleric trick. No, it's just you're cut off from the last few chapters of the game. Oh, and I can finally say this. So, the secondary requirements do require you to get all the orbs. So basically, you'd think you would, need to have the good ending to access the Gaiden chapter. However, if you are able to complete this chapter within the turn limit, you can get the bad ending and access the final Gaiden chapter as well. Of course, this is a long chapter, so that'd be difficult, and I'm not going to try doing that. It's bad enough I decided to actually record all the garbage stuff happening at the end and then the bad ending, because it's really boring and not worthwhile, but fuck it, I'm doing it anyway. Anyway, though, here we are, about to access the final Gaiden chapter. There's basically no difference between this version of the cutscene and the one with Katarina being dead. In this one, she mentions a secret passage, but it's not like the map changes depending on whether or not Katarina's alive, so it's basically just, hey, Katarina's involved here, unless she's dead. Yep, here it is, hidden passage that we apparently just find anyway if she's dead. I do not like this disrespect from the game. Katarina's birthday is a month off from Piccolo Day. How dare you disrespect her like this?